All right, everybody, welcome back to the Expanded Minds podcast. Today I have Lensa with me. And how are you doing today?
Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much. And I've been looking forward to this night to talk about things that excite me. So thank you.
No problem. You basically talked about, or in the email that you sent me, you said you would like to talk about things such as spiritual realization, the awakening movement, you know, people that claim themselves enlightened, and then mental health, and so on and so forth. So, like, on those topics, like, what are some things that you wanted to talk about within those topics that I mentioned?
Yeah. You know what? I was actually kind of thinking about what I wanted to talk about. And I came up with three topics that I thought we could really talk about and engage with um, and discuss and have fun with. And that's, thoughts and knowledge. Those are one thing, thoughts and knowledge, and then experience. And then at the end, the icing on the cake, which is enlightenment or the search that we're having, um, all that stuff that we're looking for, the searchers.
Okay, in terms of thoughts and knowledge, like, what is what comes up to mind when I mention those two words?
Thoughts and knowledge. What comes to mind is the perceptions that we create, the center, the I. That's where it comes from. And the meat of the I is knowledge and thoughts.
And when you say I specifically, are you saying like the ego, or are you saying like the pronoun I? Like, what do you mean by that?
Basically, the ego, the perceptions, the ideas that come from, knowledge. Knowledge is thoughts, thinking is thoughts, because without thinking, there is no knowledge. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and all thinking, all thoughts are matter. When I say matter, it means I don't mean it in a fancy, way. It's just that, when I think about a computer, it's matter. When I think about a relationship, it's matter because it's between two people. Um, when I think about doing stuff, it involves matter. So thinking thoughts are matter. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Are we recording already or?
Yeah, we're recording. Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of like knowledge, right, and forming that sense of I or identity, how much in terms of like maybe your parents, how much in terms of societal influence comes into play when in terms of forming that I or forming that sense of self, to that kind of absorbs all this information and knowledge and takes it in and then acts out this knowledge that's given to them.
I think that's a really good question, but then the question kind of answers itself because you answered it with the I, the center, the me, this persona the personality. Everything is really coming from the outside. The outside creates who I am. Even though as much as a lot of us would like to say, my personality is my own or my ideas are my own, they're usually always influenced from the outside. Whether it be our parents, whether it be the educational system, whether it be an experience that you might have had, maybe you've had like this intense experience where you were outside your body and you had this revelation, and then suddenly that makes up your personality, and then that becomes added to this thing we call the center, which is the me, in which every perception is shaped from this center. It's almost like math. You have to have a center to be able to measure things, right? If you don't have a center, if you don't have a point, you can't measure, obviously. Same thing with science. You have to have a point, a starting point, to be able to do all these activities that we do. And that's the same thing with us, is that we decided to make it a point And that point usually always comes from our family, our education, our society, our personal experiences. All that stuff makes up who I am. So there is nothing, absolutely nothing that you can really call your own. It's all coming from outside.
Hmm. And so this self-centered thinking, is this part of just humanity in general? Like this me, is it something that can be overcome, or is it something that like, what is your thoughts on that? Is it
Yeah,
something to even try to get rid of, or you just leave it?
you know, something happened in our process of, I don't know if there was evolution or whatever you call it. Something happened to the point where the animals don't really do this, like the dogs don't do this as much as we have, where we've separated basically ourselves from everything around us. We've started, basically, we started naming things, right? This is the tree, this is the car, this is the uh, river. And we literally made that separation literal. It's a literal fact, as if it is two different things. And so that naming process became so rigid, it almost became like it's a fact. It's an actual thing that you and I are separate. And it became the norm. And we've forgotten that we've given those things the titles, that the idea, the concept of being separated. We've created that for the sake of communicating. I mean, how are you going to communicate with one another unless I can name them? I can say that's you and that's me and that's your mom and that's your brother. Unless I do that, there is no way you and I can have a any sort of communication. We would be lost. But then in that separation, in that way of separating ourselves from all things around to be able to communicate, we've forgotten that we've done that. But really, truly, we're all kind of connected. There is no separation. There is nothing between you and I except that concept of me, you, different, you know?
And kind of like an obvious question, maybe someone that kind of struggled with what you just said there. I think somebody might hear what you say, and then you talked about in the beginning, thoughts are matter. How do you kind of how do you process through that? Because like obviously, I have like this microphone right next to me. I can grab it, I can feel it, I can I'll just toss it at something, break a wall or something. But with my thoughts, I can't see necessarily the direct effect that it would have on my immediate environment. So, I mean, maybe if you can kind of go into a little bit more detail on how thoughts are matter, and I like what you said there too, just how what's separating me and you is just the thoughts and the concepts. But like, if you can kind of break that down, I think it would help people process through what you said better.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we've gotten into this rabbit hole of um, we've become so motivated as individuals, as people, for things of the world, right? Like the goodies that we get from, how can I have a nice house? How can I have a nice car? How can I do that? And unfortunately, we've gone into this very, very narrow lane of, the only way to achieve this is you have to work hard, you have to do this and that and this. And then somebody came along and said, you know what? No, you don't really have to do that. You could do that with thinking and with your thoughts, because matter is thoughts. The thing with that is, if you're thinking about a phone, that thought about a phone, that thought is a phone, you know. Um, um, So there is no, you see, we separate ourselves from it. The thought about a phone and the phone are the same thing. Does that make any sense?
It makes sense maybe on like an energetic level, like because I mean, someone had to think of the invention of I mean, if you want to kind of narrow down a little bit more, someone had to think of the actual phone and how it's made in order to make it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I can kind of see in that direction where it's like, all right, before the phone existed, it was just a thought in someone's mind, and then it eventually became a reality where it's a physical phone. So I can kind of see how they align in which like, maybe it took a certain process for it to actually come into existence. But again, though,
But
maybe the way that we can.
all thoughts are about material things. It's matter things. It's nothing outside of it. Can you think of anything, any thoughts that's not connected to matter?
I see what you mean. So there's someone of like an externalization. Like whenever you think, it's always about something externalized or something like
That's
that.
what I mean. Yes, exactly what I mean. It's all the stuff we think about is matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so is pursuing knowledge a good thing? Is like building up all these thoughts. Like if I go out and, decide to pursue, I don't know, whatever field I'm interested in, is building up a lot of thoughts about certain things healthy, or can that be damaging to someone's psychology? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I think there is a place for everything, right? You've heard that before. There's a place for thoughts as well. Like you just said, if I want to go learn something new, a skill, obviously I'm going to need instructions, which is built up on codes. It's like a language, codes. Unless you understand those codes of a language, a different language, you're not going to get it. You have to go in there and get it and understand it and retain it and repeat it, right? That's really what knowledge is. You go in, you train your brain in a certain way in your practice, your brain, your circuit, the way how you drive a car, you have to practice it and you have to do it again and again, and it suddenly clicks. It's the same thing. Knowledge is it's very mechanical. It goes over and over and over and over in circles. It's never new. It's not something new. But do we need it? Of course we do. But then have we gotten lost with knowledge? I say yes when I want to come back to experience and how we separate ourselves. We've gained all this knowledge, which is all good and great, but then we've kind of forgotten the fact that we are hurting ourselves and everything around us by a lot of different things that we do.
Okay, and you've been like you're a licensed therapist, so you've dealt with people that have struggled with their thoughts and their own, egos and maybe a buildup. Is there certain examples that you can give in terms of like somebody that has, gone through, maybe they've calcified themselves in their thoughts, or maybe they're lost in their thoughts and they start to maybe unwind that and get to know themselves on the inside?
Yeah. I run a very I run a private therapy practice, and I really like what I do, but then sometimes, I see how we are all the same. I can see myself in their shoes because I live those things. I live those moments where I feel angered by some things, or I feel depressed about some things. But then the thing is, we forget that the thoughts that are being created are so mechanical that we're so used to them, we never question them. We never step back and say, hey, does this even make sense right now? And people don't really bother. Like you're doing what you're doing. People usually don't bother doing that. What do people usually come to me to say, hey, I have an issue. I have depression. What can I do to get out of it? And as soon as you tell me that answer, I'm out. I'm done. Are they really interested in really learning about themselves and reflecting on it and uncovering layers and layers of all the assumptions that are made? No, they're interested in an answer, and an easy answer, hopefully, you know?
Yeah, like someone with addictive tendencies will be looking for the next out kind of thing. It seems like they would have a that's how they're I guess they train their minds where it's like they want to look for a way out, and so maybe them going to psychology is like, what's my way out here? And
Yeah,
then
or like depression, very common, right? Anxiety, very common. They come to you and say, what can I do to get out of this depression? It's not looking into the depression itself. They're not interested in doing that. They're interested in getting a relief from it. And then as soon as they get the relief, they're done. But there is no urgency to look into the question and to look into oneself and to live it and to breathe it and to understand it. Nobody's interested in that kind of stuff, and they're interested in how can I put a band-aid on it and feel good, and that's what I want. I want to feel good because I don't like the pain.
how do you like get someone to like examine themselves like very deeply? Because like is someone you see that maybe they're intrigued with what you're saying, or maybe they get a hint at what you're saying and they want to go deeper into that. How would you then get somebody to start to deeply examine themselves, look into their depression, like you said?
Yeah. That requires really a very strong sense of honesty with oneself. You have to be ready to be honest with yourself and your being, your whole being. And you have to be ready to question everything that you've been told, everything and anything that you've been told. You have to be ready to shred it and flush it down the toilet right there. And who is ready to do that? Nobody. And then once you do that, you have to question your assumptions that you've made about people, about yourself, about your emotions, about where you've been in life, who you are as a person. You have to question all that. And most people are not interested in doing that. That's too much, you know? And the first step is really getting to the point where you don't have any sort of person over you telling you how to think or how to act. That's when you can have the freedom to start looking for yourself, to start being okay to even explore with somebody like myself, even to look with a person like myself. Because if you're not ready to put those things that you hold as true as the truth, then it's difficult to communicate.
And so like that's the first step, kind of like asking questions. When do you think someone starts to develop like a healthy relationship, like with their thoughts and things like that? Like, what does a healthy relationship with your thoughts and with knowledge look like?
Like I said, it has its place, right? You need it to live life. You need it. How could you live life without knowledge? How could you live life without thoughts? It's impossible. It's impossible. Like people talk all these about, you can be a thoughtless being. No, you can't. You need thoughts to live, to have relationships, to um, to be able to do things. You need those thoughts. It's really getting down to a point where you see the line between where is thought useful and where am I inserting all these things about a situation which are far, far from anything, any truth, right? So yeah, it takes a lot of um, meditation, and when I say meditation, that's another word that I don't like.
Why don't you like it?
Because it's so diluted. It's so now it's just the word doesn't even make any sense anymore, because most people are now, we've been using it in the wrong ideas. It's almost like you ask me, your clients come to you with depression, and then they ask you, if I meditate, does that gonna stop my depression? No. How is you meditating going to stop your depression? Meditation is, it's a way of life. It's a way of being. It's a way of breathing. It's almost like the way you breathe. You meditate. It's not you sit in a little corner of your room at night, light some candles, and wait for something marvelous to take. No, meditation is an everyday movement. It's going back to that idea of relationships, and it's seeing yourself in that. It's looking at yourself, because at the end of the day, the only way you can really truly look at yourself is through another person's reflection, right? But
Yeah.
that's
So like with the like spiritual movements that are going on nowadays, like what do you see in them that is very like kind of we talked about this a little bit like in the email, where it's like what do you see in these movements, these new age spiritual movements that are basically exploiting people for money and things like that, or whatever they may be doing, or intentions. Like what kind of corruption do you see with these new spiritual movements coming out?
you know you can have an experience. I'm not for a second saying you haven't had an experience that's amazing, that's so real and so tangible and so beautiful. You can have that experience. But then you have that experience, and the moment you have that experience and you recognize it as an experience, for one, we can go back to that center. There is that center. And if that center is there, that center is always the person that will translate or put assumptions on it. That center is always making that the reflection of what he has seen. So that center is always an illusion, basically. It's made up thing that's looking at it. So these people have their experiences, and then they go around making all these assumptions about, as if what they had experienced is so important, everybody else must see it. And when you do that, the life that you're living right now doesn't seem so meaningful anymore. there's something better, there's something more funner, there's something more exciting. There's something else to look forward to. There's a place where you could be at. There's a place where you would be at, where you would be better, where you would be functioning in a different way. So this life becomes absolutely meaningless. And so you basically waste your entire life trying to be this thing they told you about. For one, you don't know it's true. You're just assuming that they've had these wonderful things and you need to be there. And so you work all your life trying to get there. And then they tell you, you know what? Maybe this life, you're not worth it this life. Maybe you need to go on to the next life to get it. So keep working in this life, but you're not going to get there. And people believe it. People say, okay, and go worship all these people that tells them what to do and how to be and how to act. And you see it every day, probably more than I do too.
Mm-hmm. Well, what can be a specific example though? I know what you mean, but like maybe for somebody that's watching, maybe they want a more specific example, maybe of like a certain spiritual experience that or religion.
Yeah, I won't call anybody's name, but
Yeah, we
there's
don't have to.
gurus, right? There are all these gurus that talk about, how you need to be, what you need to be, what you need to do to self-realize, to reach enlightenment, to become this thing that you need to become, which is godlike, whatever it is. It does not exist. It's made up. It's from this center that you made it up. They made it up. They're fooling you and you're being fooled by it. It's made up. There is nothing more important than what you're doing right now. If you have goals, that's a different thing. If you want to run a business one day and that's your goal, great, work at it. And that's probably more tangible than the spiritual thing that you do, which is wake up every day trying to become enlightened. Not going to happen. And I think that also doesn't mean don't learn about yourself. That actually gives you more room to learn about yourself. And not to take people's ideas to be your own without looking at it. You have to look at it. You have to question everything that you've been told and not sleep on it. This is what we do. We take somebody's idea, if we like it, and we run off, make a nest on it, and go to bed. And that's how we act usually as humans. It's a comforting thing. Where can I get comfortable where it doesn't feel unsafe or scary, where I can hold on to something and rock with it for the rest of my life. I think we are afraid of letting it go and to see it for ourselves, to look at it for ourselves, to find it for ourselves, not based on what the guru told you, not based on what your church told you, not based on what your God told you, but what did you find on your own? What can you say on your own as a fact to yourself? Don't tell me what somebody else told you, or don't tell me what experiences you had, but what did you find?
And so what would be like? I I mean, this is a stupid question, but what would what would be your definition of enlightenment, or what do you think people hint at when they talk about some kind of spiritual reality that you can experience? And I'm not talking like people that are talking from like BS, like a BS place, like maybe someone that has experienced it, and maybe that's the path that they've formed for themselves, and they want to help other people, realize this. So maybe what would it
If
be, the
they told
deconstruction of
you
that
they
me?
realized it, if they told you they've realized it, if they told you they're enlightened, there's nothing more. You can trust me on this. They have not. They do not know what they're talking about whatsoever. And I can tell you that with 110% certainty that if they told you that they're enlightened, or it comes out of it like it sounds like that, they don't know what they're talking about. Because how can you know you're enlightened? You can't. You can't separate yourself from everything around. The only way you can say that you're enlightened is if you do separate yourself, right?
What are some questions that you've asked yourself that like pertains to knowing yourself? Like, what are some questions that you've asked yourself and maybe you've answered for your own self?
I used to ask myself, who am I? And then I discovered that's a wrong question. That's not a question. And you will probably find that to be, true too. Like, who am I? Who am I? I used to question this, who am I? Who is this? And then I figured that's it. That's not a question I should be asking myself, because that question doesn't make any sense. Because there is no person, there is no, I mean, there is a person for the means of communicating with you and with people, but there is no, there is no center. There's just a one movement, and you can't even say what it is. I can't say I am consciousness, or I am this, I am that. I mean, so who am I was a question that came up for me over and over and over again, when I was really trying to get insight into this, into this thing. But yeah.
And then, I mean, what was the next question though? Like, what was something that you asked yourself that was like insightful?
After who am I, and then I figured that was the wrong question. I would say that I started to question everything, and question even how I see things. I mean, you can look at science, you don't have to believe all these people, but science tells you that your brain doesn't even know that it's doing things. Your body doesn't know it's alive. What tells you that your body's alive? Education, what we've learned. We said, this is a living thing, that's not a living thing. So if I say I'm alive, the only way I can make that kind of a statement is because of what I know about being alive, right? My parents have told me that this living thing does these things and moves, and my education, my schooling have told me about the heart. So everything I make a statement about is because I was told that. But the body itself is finding that the body doesn't even know when it dies or when it's living. It doesn't. Only knowledge gives it that thought. Knowledge gives it a point. You're born here. you die here. But for the body, is there death? No. Is there birth? No. It's continuous movement, right? It's a continuous moving particle. It doesn't know that, like, my eyes do not know that I'm looking at you. The knowledge I have of the perception gives me the idea that I'm looking at you. And this is not like a thinking that's so new. Scientists know this, how the brain works, and but we often don't make that connection. So rely very much on our perception and our sensory perception, on our memory to tell us what is and what's not.
So perception's a main key factor in people, trapping themselves in their own mind, right?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I mean, nowadays, it's all perception, right? It's all perception. Like, let's say I have a moment with you where you say something mean to me. Instantly, what? I remember, let's say you call me stupid. Instantly, my brain flares up and says stupid is not a word that's kind, right? And so I get this emotional response with it, and then I act based on that. But then if I just step back and say, you know what? Stupid is just a word, right? But I have given that word stupid, energy, right? A lot of energy into it. I've put a lot of assumptions in it. It's almost like if I made up a word like Gucciere or something like that. You don't know what it means, right? You haven't put energy into it, like negative energy into it or positive energy into it. So it's just a word. But stupid, over the many, many years, we've put so much energy in it. In this case, we call it negative energy. So when I hear it, I respond instantly to it. And instantly with anger too. So we are always bouncing about in this movement of, memory and perception and what we've learned over the years, and that's what governs who we are.
So like in your practice, are you helping people control their perception? Or is there like is perception like a muscle that you work out, like learning how to like view things
The thing
that
is,
correctly?
when people come to me, the first thing I say to them is, I have a disclaimer. And they go, what? The disclaimer is, there is absolutely nothing this person can give you. Everything that happens in this session is by you and for yourself. And it's really true. I can give them an idea or a perception, but unless they see it, unless they see through it, who is it going to help? Nobody. The only important factor here is them, and them only. Is you have to be able to do the work, to be able to see it yourself, and not in any way put me as, in charge of you. Because the moment you put me in charge of you, then you're going to do whatever I say. And it's no longer your call, it's my call. You've put me as your person that's going to now dictate how you act, how you base your actions on. Which is why I said first and foremost is to put aside people that you consider as that can give you the way to it, the path to it, because they actually become a hinder to your path. It's the same thing with, religion, right? If you have Christianity and you accept it, you're going to act all your life from this box of the world of Christianity. But then if somebody comes along and says, hey, look at this, Christianity is based on thoughts. People created it based on imagination and fear, and they wanted to find a safe space, and they thought that Christianity was the place. And then the person says, I see it. And they move. They decide to say, okay, what? But then the sad thing is they go from Christianity to another thing. Now they go into Buddhism, or now they go into this thing called Enlightenment, where they would basically went from one box to another box, but they're all the same box.
It's like you would say, like that's kind of how they train themselves, or that's how that center views things, or that's how the perception holds, where they have to be put in that same box, or that familiarity of control, or something like that.
It's a box where it's, and if you're in a Christian box, you're acting all your life based on all these assumptions that you've been given, and then you realize maybe this is not the way, but then you jump into this self-realization, enlightenment path. But it's the same trap, because here in the Christianity box, they made up all these assumptions about religion and God, and you realize that. But then you got into this box, which is the same thing, made up assumptions about higher self and being, reaching your top and all these things. You saw it in this box, but you don't see it in this box. So you're kind of trapped in the next box. So you go on your whole life, trying to be a monk somewhere in the mountains, and trying to get enlightened for the rest of your life because you think that's the right way to do it. And then somebody comes along and says, you know what? You don't have to be a monk in the mountain. That's not the way. How about you try this new fancy, and then you try that for another 20 years. So you kind of change clothes all the time,
Yeah, and just to kind of play with what you said there, it's like maybe someone who's in more of a Christian circle, right? It can be a little bit more dry though, like maybe because there's so many rules that people have to follow, whereas maybe once they go into more of a self-realization, there's less rules. And so, transitioning over, then maybe someone can have a spiritual experience, right? And then because of the less rules, and maybe they have more time to really think and contemplate. And so, well, how you said, like maybe it's hard to see the perception of control, because now that having spiritual experiences is a different, you could say maybe flavor. But what do you think of that? Just like how maybe someone can transition over, even though Christianity has different rules, different culture, different community, different words, and someone transition over to maybe a self-realization movement, and they experience something different, where they have higher self experiences, all these meditative experiences. Like, what are your thoughts on that, and how maybe, they can get stuck and lost in the perception?
Yeah. It's interesting that too, because now you've created levels of, here you're worse over here. In the Christian box, you're kind of worse because there's too many rules, very strict. And then in this level, In this part of the level, maybe it's a little bit lenient, a little bit easier. You can explore a little bit more of yourself. It doesn't matter what level it is. It's both very much conditioning. It conditions your mind. It's at the end of the day, you're still under the mind that's making up things, making up an assumptions. You're still in that cycle, in that hole. You haven't stepped out of it yet. So it's the same thing, whether you're here in the extreme part or here you're a little bit loose, but you're still playing the game. And then you might think that, you know what, because I see it here, you'll make an assumption. Those people in that Christian box, I don't know what they're thinking. They've gone a little cuckoo over there. And then these people are thinking, you're gone a little cuckoo. And everybody's making an assumption about the other box. We're all doing that all the time. And then after you say, okay, well, what about atheists? Let's not believe in anything. And then those atheist people judge these people who are there and judge these people who are there. But they have also created themselves a box, but they don't see their little box over there, It's interesting.
Cool. Yeah. Was there any other topics that come to your mind?
I think the only thing I would say is at the end of the day, it's your life. It's in your life can only mean something when you give it a meaning, right? That's really the truth. You can search all your life looking for a meaning, but it's only meaningful when you give it meaning. And if you consider this life meaningless and you start looking and searching, that's your say, that's your choice. But there is no place to go. There is no place to be. There is nothing better than what you are right now. And hopefully when you realize that, then you can have a different kind of relationship with people around you, with things around you, with the environment, with the trees, with the nature, with the animals, and with the people that you call my loved ones, then you're going to have your relationship with those people will never be the same. But as much as you're looking for a different way, escape, I call it escape, basically escape from your reality, you're not going to find it.
All right, cool. Is there anywhere that people can find you, or is there any if someone wants to reach out to you, is there anywhere they can reach out?
Yes, I have. Do you mind putting my email in and sharing my email? You have my email.
I can probably just pop it up right here. I can just put it in right there,
Yes.
and also put it in the description as well. So.
Yes. Yep. Please reach out to me via email. I love to talk about it and go from there.
All right, cool. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, thank you so much for letting me express myself in this way. I think you're awesome. This is really a treat for me to be able to, this is a way I can express myself, and I enjoy being here. Thank you.